Hello everybody, my name is MusicMan, and in today's video I will be discussing 5 beginner mistakes that many beginners make in the game IdentityV. This game will be featured into 5 separate sections, each listed in the chapters in the description, and without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, so as I said before, this will be the top 5 mistakes I see that beginner hunters make while playing IdentityV. The number one mistake I see IdentityV hunters making is getting angry in the matches and quitting matches too soon. And while general frustration with the game is really common, especially amongst beginner players, but even up through all the way up to the pro levels, you can't let that be an excuse to end matches early if the match has not already been firmly established one way or the other. And while a significant portion of the game has to do with that kind of eye-hand coordination here, this really is primarily a strategy-based game. It's all up here in the mind. And really the most important thing is that you're able to stay cool and collected during ranked matches so that you're able to have the focus you need to finish matches strong. And while the overwhelmingly vast majority of matches are determined by the early and middle games, there are a significant number of matches that are determined even after the final cipher pop, where putting adequate pressure on the gates, even if there are 4 survivors up, you're still able to make a comeback and even pull it into a tie or even a win if you're very lucky. I talk about this more in depth in one of my previous releases. If you're interested in knowing more information, there will be a card that will appear on the screen over here, and you can just go ahead and click on that for further resources on the topic. And now we move on to tip number 2. Mistake number 2 is attempting to main way too many characters at the same time. This is another mistake that I see very much prevalent, especially with beginner players. Beginner players, a lot of times when they're new to the game, they think all the characters there are in the game are a really cool thing, and so they'll really just play with whoever they really want to in the beginning. And while that's okay in like single training mode, just to find out what type of strategy you like the most, a lot of times you're going to want to settle on at least one hunter that you're going to want to be able to say is your main and use that for the vast majority of your ranked matches. Now, the reason why this is such a problem, especially among the hunter class, is that the controls to each hunter are all extremely different. It takes a lot of time to be able to learn the ins and outs of just one specific character. And when you're trying to learn so many different characters at once, you never get that intimate experience with that one hunter to be able to learn the ins and outs of that character that you really need in order to be successful in this game. If you're interested in more content on this subject, please check out the card that will be appearing on the screen now, and this will lead you to a video where I talk more in depth of this discussion. And this leads me into my third topic. The third mistake that I see most often in beginner IDV hunters is the idea of face camping. Now, for the uninitiated, face camping is when you get a down as a hunter and you take them to the chair, but instead of attempting to disrupt ciphers after getting the down, you just sit right in front of the chair and not do anything and wait for a survivor to try to make a rescue. Now, as a hunter, face camping almost guarantees defeat. Even if you're not necessarily a top hunter at the moment, this is a strategy that I can guarantee you will need to know how to do in the future in order to be successful in your matches. You need to be able to disrupt the ciphers and camp at the same time. And the main problem with just standing in front of a chair or just hitting the chair over and over once you get it down is that this game is super fast paced. If you give the survivors a chance to get a break and get some extra decoding done, you can find yourself from a winning position to a tying position or even down to a loss position in not very much time at all. This is made even more apparent when there's a decoder on the field, particularly the mechanic, because she is able to decode more than one cipher at once. Now, that's not to say that camping isn't an important skill to have. The key here is being able to camp in such a way that you pull the survivors both off the ciphers and you're able to get some stuffing potential on the survivor that you have down. And even if you aren't able to get a stuff on the rescue, you should attempt to be able to get that double hit on the rescuer. And you'll find this to be relevant the more and more you dig into deep IDV strategy, is that eventually you get to a point where it becomes more important to distract from these objectives that the survivors are trying to push than it is actually to try to stuff a rescue or anything like that, because survivors have found ways to rescue against virtually any hunter with the correct coordination and stuff. So it really becomes all about how much you can slow down the ciphers. So if you're interested in more content of the subject, I recommend you do two things. First of all, check out some Dream Witch, Mad Eyes, or Broken Wheel content, because these three hunters, this whole strategy here of disrupting while camping is very, very much important for these three hunters in particular, but also do some research with your mains from China gameplay and observe how they use your hunter to do these kinds of things of disrupting while camping, because I guarantee that every hunter does this to some extent. They may do it in different ways specific to your character, but every hunter does this in some way. And now for the fourth mistake I see from beginner hunters, tunneling at incorrect times. Now this is something that becomes very, very important from the middle game to end game, because these are the times where it's all about time management and you need to be able to make educated decisions as to whether a chase is good or not to go for. And just generally as a rule of thumb, I would say once you start hitting 1 or 2 ciphers remaining, that's when you might want to consider going from just purely chase to starting to think about disrupting the ciphers. I've personally had matches in the past where I've had chases that have lasted 3 or more ciphers, and instead of just continuing to go after this dead chase, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go and start disrupting the ciphers. And a lot of times that decision alone can be a way for you to turn a losing situation into possibly being tieable. And while your decision to prioritize chase or disruption will change with each individual match, the decision really comes down to whether you are behind when it comes to stopping the decoding or during the chase. It's really just something that comes to you with time. Like, I've come to a point where I can kind of mentally check where the ciphers are at, and once it hits a certain point, I'll just like drop a dead chase if it's not going anywhere, and I'll go right for the ciphers or starting a new better chase. It's all just a matter of having the game sense that you learn over time and just applying it in every game that you have. If you're interested in more resources, I really would just recommend watching a whole lot of China and tournament gameplay. That's really the only way to be able to know that you're getting the best content, is that you look at high tier gameplay and just kind of see what they do first. And now the last mistake that I see from beginner IDV hunters is not prioritizing the last cipher. Now this can be done by either heavily guarding the last cipher that's being decoded, or proximity guarding 3 ciphers that are really, really close together to force survivors what I like to call one ciphering, which is to say that the final 3 ciphers are all in one area that's really easy to guard, that forces the survivors into this area that's really easy to protect, and it makes it really difficult for them to decode that last cipher. And this is how I would say I win probably roughly 40% of my matches, is at this last cipher. It's a very important thing just to keep in mind. And if you're interested in looking up more content about this, again, just watching upper tier gameplay will go a long way. And there you have it, the top 5 mistakes that I see beginner hunters making in the game IdentityV. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. And I will see you all next time. Bye bye, everybody.